haven't got it. So hopefully I'll have it by this time next week, and we'll be able to give that lecture. The original plan was that the horoscope of Anthony Fauci would just be a vignette. It would be a cursory look at his solar chart. An unusual thing happened as I was reviewing the chart, and that was that I was being stimulated by an energy that seemed to come down over me, and my entire brain was stimulated in a very unusual way that it had a pleasantness about it, but yet it was somewhat uncomfortable. And it was that I was being energized by the discoveries that I was finding with Fauci's solar chart. And I actually had to get up. I had a war room thing set up here. I always call it the war room. Baker in England, who was my teacher, called it a war room. And it's when things got intense, he'd have a table and they'd close the doors into his office, and people would gather around and they would brood and ponder and work with one another to solve whatever the problem or the situation was that concerned them at that time. So I had made my classroom here a war room, and it was intense. And I was having this experience with really the stimulation of neurons in my brain, that to such a degree that I had to get up and walk out of the room on several occasions. Anyway, we don't know the time of birth of Fauci. So we had to do a solar chart. The thing that astounded me, that what I was able to glean from the solar chart should be, by the rules of esoteric astrology, impossible for me to do because of the arrangement of the houses. One of the great laws of esoteric astrology and of a new astrology, which I believe we're going to hit on tonight, will be called quantum astrology. It's about 50 years off into the future, yet some of us seem to be picking up on aspects of it now, which really shouldn't be too surprising. The rule of really all astrologies, but in particular, it applies to quantum astrology, to esoteric astrology, and what we're now calling quantum astrology is simply this. An aspect in a horoscope, these are aspects, is in its superposition state until it's viewed. And then it collapses into probabilities, which are written out as permutations. We sometimes also call it permutative astrology. So we're going to look at the permutations in Fauci's horoscope. I did this before for Uma Abedin, who was Hillary Clinton's assistant, with just the most amazing and salubrious results that you could ever imagine. I also did her husband, Anthony Weiner. I did Vladimir Putin, his horoscope. Similarly, we'll maybe talk about that a little later. What I'm trying to do tonight is give relevance to things and people that are in the news from an astrological perspective. So I wrote copious notes for tonight's lecture, which we'll go through some of these. We're limited by time, so you're going to be in charge of time tonight, Galen. And you let me know when we're at about 20 after. You'll have to turn your phone off because we've got people from around the world who are tuning in tonight from England and Denmark and Wales and all over Turkey and India. And so we want to keep quiet, turn our phones off, and try to pay attention. I'll answer questions when we're done. So the astrology, Alice Bailey wrote one book on it. It was a pretty good book. The problem is you can't read Alice Bailey's one book and be a competent practitioner of esoteric astrology. I'm sorry to have to tell some of you that, but it's true. Baker wrote 50 books on esoteric astrology, and he gave us a dictionary, a 3-volume dictionary, which I have right here. This is volume 1, a 3-part series, which I use religiously. And what he did, it took him 7 years, during which time he didn't sleep, and he had continuity of consciousness, and he was able to elaborate this 3-volume dictionary of the 500,000 words of the English language, and gave astrological aspects for each word. That takes a hell of a mind to be able to do that. You have to be at some level initiate, 5th or higher degree initiate to do anything like that. So he did. And I recommend it to people who are really serious about things like esoteric astrology, and maybe even the emergence now of what I'm calling accurately or inaccurately quantum astrology. For me, it's quantum. It's quantum by virtue of the fact that it defies the rules, some of the rules of esoteric astrology. And the reason it defies the rules is that in a solar chart, you're hoping you don't know the time of birth of the person, so you're hoping that you're having some degree of accuracy, and that the person might have been born at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, or 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, certainly in the hours of the midheaven as they appear on the chart. I was flabbergasted. I was absolutely flabbergasted when I looked at Fauci's horoscope. And I did it in the traditional sense, but it shouldn't have worked out, yet it did, and it is confirmed, the aspects, as I perused the dictionary and as I contemplated them in my own mind. I think the first aspect that really caught me was Sagittarius in the 12th house. We always associate Sagittarius with aspirations. And we can say that yes, I think Fauci, who's 80 years old or close to it, will be on December 24th, he'll be 80 years old, is still working. Any reasonable person would ask why. Why would you be working at 80 years of age? What need making this? He's the highest paid government employee. Why would you still want to be working at 80? I didn't know any executives at General Motors when I was there who had any desire to stay until they were 80 years old. I did meet an old Polish painter on the 3rd shift one night who was 81 or 82 and was still working. He was protected by the union, and he probably worked until the day he died. That was 10 or 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Anyway, The interesting thing that immediately caught my eye was the 12th house, Sagittarius in the 12th house. And the 12th house is many things. One of the best books that you'll ever get on the houses and the planets and the signs is right here. It's volume 1 of Esoteric Astrology by Douglas Baker. It lays the groundwork. And you have to have the groundwork, the foundation constructed so you can really be reasonably competent at astrology or any of the esoteric science. And that's what most people lack. What they lack is they lack systematized study. They read this book, they read that book, they get confused, they read another book. Sally or Sue gives them another book to read. They're all over the map and they can't put it together. So we say in the ashram that I belong to, and many of my friends, that you have to have systematized study, a system of study that will lay the foundation of your efforts in the esoteric, and kind of like a pyramid. You're constantly building up to higher and higher degrees of knowledge and understanding. So I said, it looks to me, and I have a group of friends, some of them I believe are initiate people. You might expect that. Around the planet who feel the same as I do, that his aspirations will now be his self-undoing, Fauci's self-undoing. The 12th house is the house of self-undoing. It's the house of many things. It's the house of the last incarnation. It has lots of connotations which are beautifully explained in Baker's volume 1 of a 12-volume series, up to and including also the 3-volume series of the Dictionary of Astrology. So Anthony Weiner's horoscope, we may talk about that, maybe not. I began to look at Capricorn in the solar chart with the sun in Capricorn, Vulcan in Capricorn, and Mercury in Capricorn. One of the things that many of the professed great astrologers, people make money, actually make a living at. I never did it for money. I had a good job at General Motors. In fact, if anything, it helped finance some of the work in the English ashram just outside of London, England. So that was my job, was to work at General Motors and funnel my earnings as best I could to the English ashram in support of it and its amazing work. But in the dictionary, everything I'm going to point out to you tonight is in the Dictionary of Astrology. I haven't made any of it up. I haven't conjured anything. I haven't wished it to be so. It's in the dictionary. It is irrefutable in my mind. I have something I believe that is required for any good astrologer, any really student on the path of discipleship. Eventually, you have to become a conscious medium. I was in Spigno, Italy, 2001, in August of 2001. And Baker, on the last day, August 15th, we flew out. The next day, on the 16th of August, 2001. Baker said there are people in the audience who will begin to have experiences in conscious mediumship. Went right over my head. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I got on the plane the next day and flew back to Michigan, and I had some vacation time left, which I used, and went back to work for a week or so. And then it was the Labor Day weekend, September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 2001, I stayed home. I left this house one time in 3 days. My home is my sanctuary. It's a spiritual place. It sometimes is energized, I believe, by spiritual beings of various degrees. I was in my den on September 1st, meditating. And as I came out of my meditative state, I looked across my den to the end of the big green, very comfortable oriental sofa. And I saw what appeared to be the World Trade Towers in scale model, about 5 feet tall, 4 or 5 feet tall, I'd say 5 feet tall. And I looked at them, and as I looked at them, I began to think about what would you do if you had to bring those buildings down? What would be the safest way to bring those buildings down? Let's say 1,000 years from now. That was my thinking at the time, trying to rationalize that. Lo and behold, as I looked at this scale model of the two twin towers, they began to pancake, collapse on top of themselves and came down. I said to myself, if those buildings ever were blown up or destroyed, that would be the safest way to do it as far as human life is concerned. And then I remembered the story of one of the blind sheikh or some sheikh of Middle Eastern origin who was trying to topple the towers over. He's going to blow it up. They had a massive explosion in the basement back when Clinton was president. I think it might have been, it was in the 90s sometime. Some of you will remember the specific date of that. But here it was the World Trade Towers, and they were imploding on themselves. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. I had a cousin who was the secretary to the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, who, before she worked at the exchange, worked for a large real estate conglomerate in New York City, and they were integral in the part of raising the money to build the World Trade Towers. I can remember when she was actively engaged in that. And so I thought there might have been some relationship to something about my cousin. I couldn't, the more I rationalized it, the more confused I got, and I forgot about it. I went back in the next day as I do and meditated and saw the towers again, collapsing again, September 2nd. This was the 2nd of September, 2001. It happened again the next day on September 3rd, and then it was gone. On the morning, I have it written in my spiritual diary, on the morning of September 11th, I was out of body and I had astrally projected to the southern tip of Manhattan to the region of the World Trade Towers. And I was about 1.5 miles above the towers, and I could look down and I saw what I first thought were 2 tornado clouds. And then as I zoomed in with my magnified astral vision, I saw that they were, in fact, what I was witnessing was the debris and the devastation of a horrific event that had destroyed the World Trade Towers. A year later, I was on the phone with an English friend of mine who was the treasurer of the Blavatsky Lodge in London, telling him this story. And he was one of the students that was in Spigno, Italy. This is in the mountains, just outside of Naples. you could get up in the morning and I could look out my bedroom window with the hallway window and see the Bay of Naples, the city of Naples. He was there, this particular friend. And I was telling him my story a year later, and he said, yeah, he said, I had a similar experience. And he was there when Baker said, there are people in the audience who will begin to have experiences in conscious mediumship. And this person was there. And he said, my experience was, he said, I was in the plane. I was in the plane and we were flying towards the World Trade Center buildings. And he said, I knew we were going to crash. We each got a glimpse. And a lot of times that's the way it happens. It will be more prevalent in the new age as we become really and truly the living organisms known as a group, a new age group. And people will get messages and each will have a portion of the message, and the sum total of the message will tell the story. So I have many experiences in conscious mediumship, and it helps if you have some semblance of conscious mediumship so that you can interpret these aspects. It's not enough to say that this is square that and trine this, but what does it really mean? And it doesn't really mean anything until you can begin to apply sentences to the aspects. So this is our first sentence. This should not work, even by the rules of esoteric astrology, yet it works perfectly. Sun in Capricorn, bureaucracy, pretentious. He's a pretentious bureaucrat, Fauci. He's not nearly the skilled doctor that he's made himself out to be. Second aspect, Vulcan in Capricorn in the dictionary of astrology. Master of business, influenced by financial principles. That's what's driving Anthony Fauci. Mercury in Capricorn in the first house creates a tyrannical edict. What is the tyrannical edict that he created? You got to wear a mask. You got to be 6 feet apart. You got to stay home. You can't go to the funeral, your grandma's funeral. You can't visit your wife in the hospital. Can't travel. Can't go to church. Can't visit your family. Tyrannical edict. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I said in the beginning, this Capricorn, if this has any accuracy, and apparently it does in quantum astrology, if that's really and truly what we're talking about, is, are you moving the camera?
Mm-hmm. Just for that area so that it can be more clear.
The chart.
So that the meaning of an afflicted Capricorn, well, we're going to draw some images over here on this board to my right later on. It means to be isolated, crystallization, concretion, lacks malleability, resistant to change, pessimism, dependency, killjoy. He is the biggest killjoy on the planet. Don't tell me that this astrology doesn't work. Don't tell me that it doesn't work. Severity of outlook. Does he have a severe outlook about the world, the epidemic? Indeed, he does. Narrow-minded. I think he's narrow-minded. He's parsimonious. It's in the dictionary. I don't make this stuff up. This is in the dictionary. Selfishly ambitious. Selfishly ambitious. Dr. Fauci, 80 years old, makes more money than the President of the United States, still working at 80 years of age. Selfishly ambitious. He is hard and calloused, cold and calculating. Those are the words that are in the dictionary of astrology. If you don't have the dictionary of astrology, you're kidding yourself. You've got to have more than whatever it is you think you're interpreting in the horoscope. It takes initiate knowledge or some degree higher than me of conscious mediumship. I thought it was interesting when I looked at the opposition of the sun and the earth, the sun and Capricorn in the first, and Cancer and the earth in the seventh house. And the parsing, according to the dictionary, is delinquency. I think that Fauci is delinquent. We used to talk about in England about the adult juvenile delinquents. I used to know a lot of them when I was a young guy. Minnesota Fats, the great pool player, was almost an archetypal example of an adult juvenile delinquent. And one of his friends, who was a friend of mine, a very dear friend, Cornbread Red, they were adult delinquent people who just never really grew up. And we all know people like that. One of the most staggering things that I came across in the horoscope that was confirmed by the dictionary, Baker's Dictionary of Astrology, was also this idea of the earth as it's the sun, as it's opposing the earth, parses as the word delinquency and its connection of Sagittarius in the 12th house, again, where I said he was a victim of his aspirations. It parses as a drug trafficker. Wow. Is Anthony Fauci a drug trafficker? Yeah. He is the ultimate drug trafficker. I can't make this stuff up. It's in the dictionary. Look it up. It's there. Self-undoing at the end of his life. Self-undoing. The predictions of people that I know in the world who I consider to be disciples, people, some at a significant initiate level, say that they believe that Fauci is just the tip of the iceberg. He will be the first domino to fall. I believe he will. In fact, the very words that I used to explain that were the exact words that my friend and confidant in England told me were spoken by a friend of his. The first domino to fall. You can't make that up. That's the truth. It's the absolute truth. His second house, which usually we refer to as your personal wealth and money, has, in the dictionary of astrology, Mercury and Aquarius, the word divert, to divert, came up. Also, the last gasp came up. At one's last gasp, he will improperly disclose some secret. The old saying, there's no honor among thieves. If this guy is as bad and as suspect as I think he is, he may divulge secrets. They say that Ghislaine Maxwell has spilled the beans on Jeffrey Epstein. I have my own theories about that. Believe me, he didn't kill himself. He did not kill himself. What those guys are involved in is so evil and so heinous that when the world finally gets the truth, which can only come out gradually, because if you gave it to humanity all at once, nobody would believe it. I believe that it will trickle out. One of my initiate friends in England said that his contacts on the inner planes have told him that the spiritual plan of the hierarchy is unfolding. We oftentimes talk about 2025. Well, we're 4 years away from 2025. And in 2025, we're supposed to have the externalization of the spiritual hierarchy of the planet, who will lead us into a new world renaissance. America is supposed to be a part of that, but will only be a part of it if they can remain free of socialism. It's kind of hard to do in its present moment, but it's worth thinking about. The third house, like I say, these houses, none of this should really work because it's a solar chart, but yet it almost seems to work perfectly. And it works perfectly, perhaps because of the very laws and the rules of quantum as they apply to astrology. I'm going to read a statement by the Namanikaya, who is behind the externalization of some of this work that we're using here tonight. But in the third house with the sun in Pisces, the parsing of the words elaborated by the dictionary are counting on the fact that money was or is available. Money. He always needed money for projects. He gave money to Wuhan, to the Chinese. He gave money to the Chinese for experimentation with viruses. One of the things that was interesting at the very beginning, right here in this room, at the very beginning, we didn't even know it was happening, of the COVID-19 pandemic. I gave a lecture on the medical hypothesis for the origin of AIDS. Does anybody remember that lecture? We gave a PowerPoint. You were here.
Oh, that's right.
Remember that?
Yes.
And we talked about a medical hypothesis for AIDS and how it may have evolved out of the World Health Organization's attempt to eradicate smallpox around the world, which they believe they did. I can't go into the lecture, right? It's an incredible lecture. It's one that we need to give another time on Zoom. It's extraordinary, extraordinary lecture. There's a paper that was written by a genius friend of mine at General Motors. He was the smartest guy at General Motors, I once told my vice president. Brilliant man. His hobby was microbiology. Had a extraordinary IQ, if that means anything. He was a brilliant man, I do know that. Anyway, in the fourth house, Mars and Aries in the fourth, and the of this and the parsing of this in the dictionary of astrology, the word quizzling comes up. Do we all know what quizzling is?
No.
There was actually a trader, a Nazi trader. I thought he was from Norway, but I guess it was from England, whose name was Quisling. And Quisling, since World War II, has taken on a really deferential meaning of a person who is untrustworthy and conniving and a schemer. To be a Quizler or to be Quisling is to be deceitful. Dr. Fauci, fourth house, Aries and Mars, in the dictionary of astrology. Fifth house. One of the things that came up in his fifth house solar chart, who knew? Something about an important election. Now, for months before the presidential election, I said to myself, they'll never defeat Donald Trump. The only way they can defeat Donald Trump is they have to perform the most heinous criminal crimes, lying, deceitful stuff that they could ever pull out, probably in connection with the CIA and the FBI. It would take at that level to pull it off. A lot of people think it did. We'll see. One of the things that also came up was the Uranus Taurus retrograde, right here. Uranus Taurus retrograde in the fifth house. The house may not be that important, but it certainly parses out in Fauci's horoscope. So somebody could say, well, he was born at noon. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. He was born close to maybe, maybe not. We don't know his time of birth. But I've done these similar horoscopes with Uma Abedin, who was just born down the road in Kalamazoo. How many of you knew that? And we did her chart, solar chart, at 12 o'clock. And the accuracy of that horoscope is absolutely flabbergasting. It's absolutely flabbergasting. It even shows her marriage to a Jewish man, Anthony Weiner, her husband. So that aspect says he's trying to function. He's trying to function as a backseat driver, Fauci. He's not really, didn't really have his fingers in it. He's just in the back seat and he's maybe advising or directing. Not really, you can't call him a criminal. You can't blame it all on him because he's just a backseat driver. It's in the horoscope. Then it shows in his horoscope, in the same house, in the same aspects, a team of people begin to ask questions. And that's exactly what's happening now. Teams of people, or congressmen, are asking questions to Fauci. If you watch the news, not necessarily mainstream media who are trying to protect him, others. The sixth house, it was interesting with Jupiter and Gemini retrograde, plus the dictionary says Sagittarius in the 12th house. I keep going back to this Sagittarius in the 12th house. overeducated. I don't know if he's overeducated or not. He's very pretentious. And we said in the very beginning, a pretentious bureaucrat. That's how this parses in Baker's Dictionary of Astrology. It's worth thinking about. We got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So there's a couple of things I wanted to do in order to amplify the meaning and the significance of esoteric astrology and what we may or may not really be correctly identifying this evening as quantum astrology. Baker said it was coming. This may be just an inkling of it. Was a letter, a note, writings from the Nirmanakaya, who was Plato, in 1991 concerning the astrology and the work of Douglas Baker in the English ashram. The Nirmanakaya said, I am working on the clefs and symbols of a universal language of the causal world for expressing all intellectual concepts, artistic values, and spiritual encounters, reducing them thus to a common denominator, an astrological key. The meaning of life cannot be taught in any other way. It is a lingua sacra, meaning it's a sacred language. It absolutely is a sacred language. In the expression of this universal language, we are synthesizing the new universal religion for all of mankind. As Christianity evolved out of the Piscean age, so too will new religions with added significance and meaning evolve out of the age of Aquarius. There will be a group or a series of religions. One of them will be based on the environment, the worshiping of the Davic kingdom, certainly showing the expression for angelic Davic beings, guardians of nature, who will help mankind redeem the earth. Another religion will be based on, it'll kind of evolve out of things like Star Trek, space age movies where there's life on other planets. Most assuredly there is. Anybody who's read The Secret Doctrine is aware of this truth and is aware of higher beings, beings that lived on Venus. We call the Manasaputras. In fact, we have a beautiful lecture on the Manasaputras, who helped aid in the evolution on Earth of evolving man, the Manasaputras. And I gave a lecture on it one time, explaining the symbolism of the statuary, the huge statues on Easter Island, as being their interpretation, because they were a clairvoyant race of people who could see the remnants of the astral wraiths of the Manasaputras, and the Easter Island was a point of entry into the earth millions of years ago, and it's been able to survive because it's like a three-legged stool. It's 3 volcanoes that came up out of the Pacific and have created a very stable landmass. Can't go into detail on that right now, but I think I've got a lecture PowerPoint lecture on it. It's a very interesting subject. So these Manasaputras, who are similar to the Nirmanakayas, we say that a Nirmanakaya is a divine rebel, and they break most of the rules. They come in to really change things. And you would expect that as we reach the end of the Piscean age and the birthing of the Aquarian age, which is causing all this upheaval and chaos and the disturbances in the world at this time. Anyway, it's worth thinking about.
So is there questions
I
maybe?
think I think if anybody has a question, I'll be glad to answer here in our classroom. And if not, we'll take a break. I think we only had, what do we have, Julia?
It's 8:23 right now.
Yeah. So we've about run our limit, right?
Yeah.
For the Zoom meeting. Can you hold that a little more steady there?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was maybe
Yeah.
since question. Yeah.
All right. All right. I see Joe and Liz Rosenberger there from South Gull Lake outside of Kalamazoo. There must be some other people too involved. I know
Yeah,
that
so there is Mary Beth.
Mary Beth. Yeah, hi Mary Beth. Lovely lady. She had a similar experience. I have to tell you a little bit about her. I hope she doesn't mind.
She
But
may mind.
She may, but I don't think so because I'm only going to say good things about her.
Okay.
She, through a similar effort that I made, had spiritual experiences. She began to keep a diary, a spiritual diary. She had salubrious results. She really and truly is a woman of the new age who unfortunately moved from Michigan to Utah. I'm happy for her and her family.
And Amira also here.
Yeah.
Amira.
Oh, Amira, yeah. Yeah, my good friend Amira, my photographer, I sometimes refer to her as. But yeah.
And Neil watching.
Nil?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But
and Mary Beth say thank you, David.
Yeah. So I've come and visit sometime. Anyway, that pretty much finishes it for me tonight, but I just wanted to give you a cursory look at this. And even me, I'm flabbergasted by it because what I gave you, according to the rules of esoteric astrology and a solar chart, none of this should be accurate according to the houses, and yet it is. It's extremely accurate. And that's the nature of esoteric astrology, and it's the nature of what I believe in the future will be quantum astrology. Baker said about 60 years, that was 10 or 15 years ago. So we may be getting an inkling of it here now. I don't know. I can't deny it. I can't say it's absolutely true.
Yeah,
But I can tell you this, that what I gave you tonight is accurate, and it's in the dictionaries of astrology written by Douglas Baker, where, as I said before, he took the 500,000 words of the English language and gave them aspects. And you can look through volume 1, wherever I had it. I'm not sure. Volume 1, here it is. And he gives, just like any dictionary, there's the word and there are the aspects for the words. And it's incredible. It's one of the most incredible things on the planet. You think of the mind, he didn't sleep for 7 years. He did sleep, but he had continuity of consciousness. And some of you might know what that means. It's a wonderful thing. I've had it throughout my life. It's an extraordinary thing to be asleep and yet to be conscious of the world around you and to be able to go into the astral worlds and and to review things and situations and part of discipleship. Okay, I guess that's it for this evening. So if you guys want to, the students here at my home in my classroom, I've got some handouts that I wanted to give you tonight. Take them home with you. They're mantras that I recommend you use. Galen got his first. Did you get one, Julia?
No, I did not.
Okay. Can you pass these out, Randy?
Sure.
Make sure everybody gets one. Make sure everybody gets one. Return them to me, whatever's left.
Thank you,
But they're
David.
really powerful, and I recommend reading them. Thank you. I recommend reading them from beginning to end, just as they're written. Really powerful stuff. I've used them for many, many years with salubrious results. So as you prepare, you seat yourself for meditation, I recommend reading these words. They're ancient. Some of them are so ancient that they predate Sanskrit and Senzar, which are some of the oldest known languages. I had a document that was shown to me one time by an initiate being who they were written on palm leaves. I've told some of you the story of this book. It was taken to Oxford in England. They were the palm leaves that are typical of what you see in some of the New Age postings that people put on a palm leaf, and they're about this high and they're about that wide. And these were impervious to fire and water. And the amazing thing about the book was that there was no ink, no paint. The writings were actually embossed into the palm leaves, and you could read them perfectly with the light above would show what we called in the automotive design world a highlight. It was highlighted. And you could read it perfectly. And it was just pressed, the image pressed in to the fiber of the palm leaves. Extraordinary document. I have seen Tibetan writings, ancient Tibetan writings and Sanskrit writings that, but they use ink, colored paint, white, black. Blavatsky in the opening extracts of The Secret Doctrine has similar palm leaves, and there's symbols, and she knows the symbols. It's a circle. There's another circle filled with white, and then a circle filled with white and a dot. And then the next one is the dot moves and creates a line. It's a whole series of them. And if you are a student of The Secret Doctrine, you're probably familiar with what I'm talking about. These were older than that. They had no paint. There's no pigment. Extraordinary. I can still remember the words or the writings of the alphabet used, and it wasn't like anything you ever saw. And probably could even have been, could have been pre-Atlantean, could have been Venusian in its origin. But I'm telling you, it was one of the most incredible objects. And the same man had this box of gemstones. I think I've told some of you about. I held any of them. He let me touch them, hold them, put them up to my third eye. That were materialized, many of them, he said, by Saint Germain. They were extraordinary gemstones that were taken to a gemologist in Cape Town who said he could not put a value on them. Okay, I think that's it.
That's really good.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Mary Beth is saying, very interesting class. Thank you very much. Can you please email the handout to me? Wonderful, David. Just so you know.
I don't know if we can do that.
I just took a picture and
Oh,
I
okay, good.
emailed it to her, and I don't know if she can read, but if not,
If she
I-
can't, we'll mail her one in post office,
okay, all right.
but not through Chicago.
That's right.
FedEx,
Try to avoid the Chicago post
Maybe
office.
US mail isn't.
Right. Right.
Scan or fax.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
up to the living room.
Yeah, let's go up to the living room and we'll have our little
David,
ritual.
you may want to say goodbye to everybody.
What?
Goodbye to everybody.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. We'll try to get back next week. It'll be a little more difficult because we're going to have a PowerPoint on the consciousness and occult history of the moon. A very interesting subject indeed. So tune in at 7:30 next Wednesday. Thank you.